Hello, this is @TeachSmith. I'm a secondary school English teacher in England and I'm trying to find ways to support my GCSE students in revising for their English literature exams. I've been doing some revision wraps, but just the other day I saw a diagram which compared power and conflict poems by theme. Now this was a publicly available knowledge organiser, however I thought it could have been improved. I liked it, but I thought it could be better, so I had a go myself. Now, this is a kind of Venn diagram. It compares all 15 power and conflict poems by various themes. However, I still wasn't happy with it. Despite the compliments that it got, I still thought it could be improved. But stepping back for a moment, what do I mean by the power and conflict poems? So every student, every English literature GCSE student in England must study either the love and relationships poems or the power and conflict poems. This will form part of their English literature paper 2 exam. Now that's 15 poems. 15 poems they have to understand. They have to understand the structure, the meaning, the context, and they have to remember key quotations. So this is my improved version. I hope it makes sense, and I hope that is interesting, and I hope that is helpful to you as a student, or perhaps even if you're a teacher watching this. So as you can see, I have different categories that are colour coded. Let's start from the top and then let's go clockwise around. So if we start from the top, we have tyrants. Tyrants ruling with violence and fear. Now, My Last Duchess involves a tyrant. The Duke is an awful man, okay? He's an awful human being. It's strongly hinted at that he had his Duchess, his wife, his young wife, killed out of jealousy, the fact that he couldn't control her. Now, he has the Duchess as a painting on the wall, so he can kind of control the narrative about her. He even has a curtain in front of the painting. Now, this idea of controlling her identity, controlling the narrative about her, links to tissue, because tissue is all about different forms of identity and different forms of narratives that we have, be it religion, politics, borders, all of those sorts of things. So those are my first two categories that cross over, tyrants and identity. So tissue and My Last Duchess might be an interesting comparison, but quite a tricky one, and one of the more difficult ones. Now, the next category that I found the most interesting, I would say, is internal conflict. Inside of internal conflict we have London, Checking Out My History, Remains, Kamikaze, Emigre, Poppies, Bayonet Charge, War Photographer. Lots of internal conflict. But as you can see as well, there's lots of overlap. So, slowing down. In terms of identity and internal conflict, we see in that part of the Venn diagram as such, London and Checking Out My History. Then we have this kind of triple crossover between identity, internal conflict, and the next category, which is reality of war. That is Kamikaze and Emigre. We then have internal conflict and the reality of war, Kamikaze, Emigre, Remains, Poppies, Bayonet Charge, and War Photographer. At this time I'm not going to discuss all of these because that would be an awfully long video and probably end up being quite confusing. My aim is that this is someone using this that would be already familiar with these poems. Now in the reality of war, I've just put Charge of the Light Brigade without any overlap. That does mean, however, that you can compare Charge of the Light Brigade with any poem from the reality of war cluster. So that could be Storm on the Island, Exposure, Bayonet Charge, Remains, Poppies, War Photographer, etc. However, you should know which ones are more strongly linked. For example, Charge of the Light Brigade and Bayonet Charge are a very clear comparison. Now, we have another overlap to the left of reality of war. Between reality of war and the power of nature. Storm on the Island, Exposure, both talk about the reality of war. Storm on the Island talks about the Troubles in Belfast and other parts of Northern Ireland. Bleeding over into the Republic of Ireland, and Exposure talks about how winter is the real enemy there, not the Germans, because it concerns Wilfred Owen, who is trying to expose the lies of the propaganda. So Storm on the Island and Exposure are both about the reality of war, but they're also about the power of nature. The prelude is just in the power of nature. However, that does mean you can go with anyone in that green dotted oval. So the prelude with Ozymandias, the prelude with Storm on the Island. The prelude with Exposure could be a bit of a shaky one, but it is possible. Remember, any poem can compare with any other poem. There are just stronger or more obvious or more useful comparisons than others. Then we come all the way around to Ozymandias. Ozymandias was a tyrant, but his tyrannical power and his tyrannical legacy in the shape of a statue is slowly worn away by the desert sands, and he's left alone and broken. So I hope that this layout and I hope this format can really help you to revise. So what exercises can you do to help you remember this? How can you remember this layout? Well, there's two different ways that I recommend. So firstly, take out the categories, and this is available in the resources below. Take out the categories and try and put them back in. So try and put back in tyrants, identity, internal conflict, reality of war, power of nature. Okay, try and put that in again until you can do that confidently. The other way, and again you can do this in stages, you can put in some and not others, is put the poems back into each bracket. Okay, it's tricky, but having the same format, like a gap fill, almost like a kind of jigsaw puzzle, will help you. And if you do this enough times, you'll be able to copy out the whole thing by memory. You could take out both. You could take out all the categories and all the poems, just have the shapes with their colours and fill the whole thing out. I sincerely hope that this PowerPoint has been helpful, this video has been helpful. This has been Teach Smith. Thank you very much.